"What a gorgeous house," my daughter-in-law Vanessa said as she slowly looked around the dining room. "Mom is gonna love living here." She spoke with such confidence that anyone listening would have assumed the decision had already been made. I didn't interrupt. I simply lifted my coffee cup and watched. Vanessa rested her hand on the polished walnut table my late husband, Daniel, had built more than 30 years earlier. Every scratch on its surface held a memory. Every corner carried a story. To her, it was only another piece of furniture waiting to be rearranged. "I'm thinking the upstairs bedroom with the sunrise view will be perfect for Mom," she continued. "Oliver and I can convert the basement into a home office. It's practically another apartment." Her mother, Martha, smiled in agreement as she admired the windows. "It'll save everyone so much money," Martha added. Across the table, my son Oliver lowered his eyes to his dessert plate. He picked at the last bite of chocolate cake without saying a single word. His silence spoke louder than anything else. "My name is Eleanor Brooks. I'm 67 years old, widowed for nearly 6 years, and I've lived in this house for over 4 decades. Every brick reminds me of the life Daniel and I built together. We planted the maple tree in the front yard when Oliver was 5. We painted every room ourselves because we couldn't afford professional decorators. Nothing inside these walls happened by accident. Vanessa, however, acted as though she were touring a property she'd already purchased. The guest room would make a lovely craft room for Mom," she said, pulling a small measuring tape from her handbag. "I'll just check if her sewing cabinet fits." She actually began measuring, without asking, without hesitation. I placed my cup onto its saucer. The soft clink echoed through the dining room. Then I looked directly at her. No. Only one word, nothing more. The room became perfectly still. Vanessa blinked twice before forcing a laugh. "I'm sorry? My answer is no." She stared at me, waiting for a smile that never came. "I think you've misunderstood," she replied politely, although irritation was already creeping into her voice. "We're only trying to help you. This house is far too large for one person." I understood every word. I folded my hands calmly on the table. "What I don't understand is why you're assigning bedrooms in a house that doesn't belong to you." Oliver shifted uneasily. "Mom?" I raised my hand gently. "I'm speaking." He fell silent again. Vanessa's smile tightened. "We've discussed this for months." "You may have discussed it," I answered. "You simply forgot to include the homeowner." Martha cleared her throat. "I wouldn't be any trouble." "I never said you would." I turned toward her. "But that doesn't change the answer." Vanessa leaned forward. "Eleanor, we're family." "Exactly. Families help each other. They also respect each other's boundaries." Oliver finally found his voice. "Mom, those stairs are getting harder for you." I almost smiled. "I swim every morning." "I know. I mow my own lawn." "I know. I shovel my own driveway." He looked embarrassed. "I think I'm managing just fine." Vanessa sighed dramatically. "We already ended Mom's apartment lease." That caught my attention. "You what?" "She's moving next month." "And whose decision was that?" She hesitated. "Well, ours." I nodded slowly. "So you created a problem and expected me to solve it." "It's not like that." "It sounds exactly like that." For a few moments, nobody spoke. Finally, I stood and began gathering the empty dessert plates. "I'm sure you'll find a wonderful place for Martha," I said calmly as I carried the dishes toward the kitchen. "There are several lovely retirement communities nearby." Vanessa's voice sharpened. "She's not going to one of those places." "Then you'll need another plan." She followed me into the kitchen. "You can't seriously expect her to start over." I rinsed a plate beneath warm water. "I expect everyone to make decisions about their own lives. You have all this extra space. And I also have the right to decide who lives in it." Her expression changed completely. The pleasant smile disappeared. "You'd really choose an empty house over your own family?" I dried my hands with a towel before answering. "This house isn't empty." She frowned. "I live here." Neither of us spoke again. A few minutes later, Oliver quietly thanked me for dinner while avoiding eye contact. Vanessa barely said goodbye. Martha offered me a small, apologetic smile before following them outside. I watched through the front window as they climbed into Oliver's SUV. Vanessa talked with animated gestures while Oliver kept both hands tightly on the steering wheel. He never looked back. I closed the curtains. The silence that settled over the house felt peaceful. For the first time that afternoon, I poured myself another cup of black coffee and sat beside the living room window. Daniel used to tell me that people reveal their true intentions the moment someone tells them no. Until then, everyone assumes they deserve a yes. As the evening sun filled the room with warm golden light, I realized something important. That single word hadn't ended the conversation. It had only begun. The following Tuesday, my doorbell rang just after 10 in the morning. When I opened the door, Vanessa stood on my porch with 2 large cardboard boxes stacked in her arms. She smiled as though nothing unpleasant had happened a few days earlier. "Good morning, Eleanor," she said cheerfully. "These are just a few of Mom's things. They'll only stay here for a little while." Before I could answer, she stepped past me and carried the boxes into my hallway. She placed them beside the staircase as though she belonged there. "There," she said proudly. "We'll organize everything once the move is finished." I folded my arms. "What move?" She paused. "Ours." "I believe I already answered that." She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, you'll come around." Without another word, she walked back outside, climbed into her car, and drove away. She never asked permission. She simply assumed possession would become acceptance. I stood in the hallway for a long moment looking at the boxes. They weren't mine. Neither was the decision behind them. I walked into the garage, wheeled out my old hand truck, and carefully loaded both boxes onto it. They were heavier than they looked, filled with dishes, blankets, and framed photographs. I rolled them straight back onto the front porch beneath the covered entrance, where they would stay dry if it rained. Then I sent Oliver a short message. "Vanessa left Martha's belongings here. They're waiting outside. Please collect them before tonight." Nothing more. No anger, no lecture, just facts. Less than an hour later, my phone rang. Oliver. "Mom," he said wearily, "you didn't have to leave the boxes outside." I certainly did. Vanessa was only trying to get organized. In my house. He sighed. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." "No, Oliver," I spoke gently. "I'm making my boundaries clear." He remained silent. "If someone stores belongings in a house without permission," I continued, "they're assuming ownership they don't have. They're just boxes. They're the beginning." Another long pause followed. "I'll come after work," he finally said. "I'll be home." That evening, he arrived alone. Without saying much, he carried both boxes back to his vehicle. He looked tired, older, as though he were caught between 2 worlds and belonged to neither. I almost invited him inside for coffee, almost. Instead, I wished him a safe drive. He nodded quietly and left. I believed the matter might finally be over. I was wrong. 2 mornings later, I heard someone unlocking my front door. My cleaning service wasn't due until Friday. I stepped into the hallway just as the door swung open. Vanessa walked in carrying 2 shopping bags. She smiled confidently. "I thought I'd start clearing out the basement." She headed toward the stairs. "We'll need room for Mom's sewing equipment." I stepped directly into her path. "Stop." She looked surprised. "What? Where did you get that key?" "Oh." She laughed lightly. "Oliver gave me one ages ago in case something happened to you." "I see." She reached for the basement door. I caught her wrist, not roughly, only firmly enough to stop her. "Give me the key." Her smile vanished. "Seriously?" "Now." She crossed her arms. "You're being unreasonable." "No, I'm protecting my home." "Eleanor, this is family." Family doesn't enter someone's house after they've been told no. She stared at me for several seconds before digging into her purse. With obvious frustration, she slammed the key onto the hallway table. "There." Then she pointed a finger toward me. "One day you'll regret pushing everyone away." "I don't push people away." I picked up the key. "I simply refuse to be pushed." She spun around and stormed out, letting the front door slam behind her. The sound echoed through the house. I stood quietly for a moment. Then I picked up my purse. Within the hour, a locksmith had replaced every lock on the front door. He handed me 3 brand new keys. One stayed on my key ring. One went into the small safe inside my bedroom closet. The third remained inside my desk drawer. No one else received a copy. After thanking the locksmith, I drove to my bank. For years, I'd transferred money every month to help Oliver with Caleb and Lily, my 2 grandchildren. It was never an obligation. It was a gift. But gifts should benefit the people they're meant for. Instead of ending the payments, I opened 2 separate savings accounts, one for Caleb, one for Lily. The money would continue growing until each child became an adult. No one else could touch it. As I signed the paperwork, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not because I was winning, because I was protecting what mattered. That afternoon, I returned home, watered my roses, and sat beneath the maple tree Daniel had planted decades earlier. The breeze carried the scent of fresh-cut grass. For the first time in weeks, I smiled. Boundaries don't always begin with locked doors. Sometimes they begin with quiet decisions no one else even notices. Mine had finally been made, and deep inside, I knew this story was far from over. The first day of the new month arrived with bright sunshine and cool autumn air. I was sitting in my sunroom with a cup of black coffee when my phone rang. The screen displayed Vanessa's name. I answered calmly. "Eleanor, where's the money?" she demanded before I could even say hello. "What money?" "The monthly money for Caleb and Lily. It never reached our account." I took another sip of coffee. It wasn't supposed to. What does that mean? I've opened savings accounts for both children. Every dollar I plan to give them is going directly into their future. Silence. Then came a sharp breath. "We needed that money." "I know. We already paid deposits for summer programs. I'm sure you'll find a way." Her voice became louder. "You had no right to change it without asking." I smiled faintly. "It has always been my gift, Vanessa. A gift isn't an entitlement. You're punishing us." "No, I'm protecting my grandchildren. They're our children. And they're my grandchildren. When they turn 18, they'll receive every dollar I've saved for them." She let out an angry laugh. "So this is revenge." "It isn't revenge. It is responsibility." She lowered her voice. "We're family. Family doesn't spend another person's money before receiving it." The conversation ended a few moments later. For the first time since all of this had begun, I hung up without feeling guilty. Instead, I felt free. A few days later, someone knocked on my front door. It was Oliver, alone. He looked exhausted. Dark circles rested beneath his eyes, and his shoulders seemed heavier than I had ever seen them. I invited him inside. This time we sat across from each other in the kitchen, the same place where he had once done homework while Daniel grilled hamburgers in the backyard. "So," I said softly, "what brings you here?" He stared into his untouched coffee. "Vanessa's upset." "I know. She thinks you're trying to divide the family. I think someone else started that." He sighed deeply. "We already told Martha she could live here." I looked at him carefully. "Did you tell her?" He hesitated. "No." "Who did?" "Vanessa." "And why didn't you stop her?" He rubbed his forehead. "I didn't want another argument." "There it is." He frowned. "What?" "The real problem." He looked confused. "You've spent years avoiding arguments. I just wanted everyone happy. You can't keep everyone happy when one person ignores everyone else's wishes." He remained silent. I continued gently. "Oliver, this house isn't just property." "I know. It's where your father spent the last years of his life." He nodded. "I remember. It's where we celebrated every birthday." "I know. It's where I learned how to live without him." His eyes filled with regret. "I never thought about it like that." "I know you didn't." Another long silence settled between us. Finally, he whispered, "Vanessa says if you don't change your mind, she'll stop bringing the children here." I looked directly into his eyes. "Is that a threat?" "No. It sounds like one." He lowered his head. "I don't want to lose either side. You already are." He swallowed hard. "I love those children more than anything." "I know. And nothing will ever change that. But listen carefully." He looked up. "If someone uses children as bargaining tools, the problem isn't the grandparent refusing to surrender her home." He didn't answer, because he couldn't. Before leaving, he stood near the front door for a long moment. "I'm sorry." Those were the only words he spoke. I watched him drive away, hoping they were the beginning of something better. 2 peaceful weeks passed. The roses continued blooming despite the cooler weather. I played cards every Wednesday with my lifelong friend Grace and spent quiet evenings reading in Daniel's favorite armchair. The silence no longer felt lonely. It felt earned. One afternoon, I noticed a familiar sedan parked across the street. Martha stepped out slowly. She didn't come to the front door. Instead, she stood by the white picket fence, running her fingers across the wood as though searching for answers. After several minutes, I opened the front door. "Hello, Martha." She turned, looking almost startled. "I hope I'm not bothering you." "Not at all. Would you like some tea?" She smiled weakly. "I'd appreciate that." We sat together in my kitchen. Steam drifted gently from our cups. After a long silence, Martha finally spoke. "Vanessa told me you invited me to live here." I shook my head. "No." Her shoulders dropped. "I was afraid of that." "I never made such an offer." She looked down into her tea. "I sold my apartment." "I'm sorry. I thought everything had already been arranged." "It hadn't." Tears gathered in her eyes. "I don't know where I'll go now." I reached across the table and gently placed my hand over hers. "I know a wonderful retirement community only a few miles away." She looked surprised. "You'd still help me?" "I won't give away my home." I smiled kindly. "But I won't turn my back on someone who is misled." Martha squeezed my hand. For the first time since we met, we weren't standing on opposite sides. We were simply 2 mothers trying to understand how everything had gone so terribly wrong. News of Martha's visit spread faster than I expected. 3 days later, just after lunch on Sunday, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, Oliver stood beside Vanessa. Caleb and Lily waited behind them, while Martha remained quietly near the driveway. Vanessa held a thick folder against her chest. "We need to settle this," she announced. "I'm not discussing property today," I replied. "This won't take long." "It already has." She tried to step inside, but I remained firmly in the doorway. "If you've come as family, you're welcome for coffee," she lifted the folder. "If we've come with legal paperwork, then today's visit is over." Vanessa's expression hardened. "You should at least hear us out." Against my better judgment, I allowed them into the living room. The children sat quietly on the sofa while Oliver remained standing. Vanessa opened the folder and removed several neatly printed documents. "I spoke with an attorney," she said confidently. "If you transfer ownership of the house to Oliver now, there will be fewer taxes later. You'll still have the right to live here for the rest of your life." I stared at the papers. "And where, exactly, would I live?" She smiled. "The basement apartment." I almost laughed. "The basement? It makes perfect sense. This house has 3 bedrooms upstairs. Oliver and I would need those." "I see." She nodded as though the matter had already been settled. I turned toward my son. "Did you agree to this?" Oliver looked at the floor. I thought it might be practical." "For whom?" Neither of them answered. I folded the papers and placed them back on the coffee table. "When Daniel and I bought this house," I said quietly, "we worked 2 jobs each. We skipped vacations, repaired everything ourselves, and counted every dollar." No one spoke. "We didn't build this home so someone else could move us into the basement while we were still alive." Vanessa crossed her arms. "You're making this emotional." "Because it is emotional. It's only a house." "No." I looked around the room. "It's 40 years of memories." I pointed toward the hallway. Oliver took his first steps there, then toward the fireplace. My husband read bedtime stories beside that chair. Finally, I looked out the window. "We planted that maple tree together before Oliver even started school." The room fell silent. "This isn't just property. It's my life." Vanessa sighed impatiently. "If you don't plan ahead, everyone loses." "I already planned ahead." She frowned. "What do you mean?" "My will has been completed for years." Oliver looked surprised. "You never told me." "I didn't need to." Vanessa leaned forward. "So the house comes to Oliver?" "It will." Her face brightened. "After I'm gone." The smile disappeared instantly. "And if anyone continues trying to force me out of my own home," I added calmly, "I'll change every document tomorrow morning and donate this house to a foundation that supports widows." Oliver's eyes widened. You wouldn't? I absolutely would. Vanessa stood abruptly. You'd punish your own family? No, I'm protecting myself from people who mistake kindness for weakness. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then something unexpected happened. Martha stood. She walked quietly toward her daughter. That's enough, Vanessa. Vanessa turned in disbelief. Mom? You never told me Eleanor said no from the beginning. You let me believe she invited me. Vanessa searched for words that never came. Martha looked at me. I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for. She nodded gratefully. Then she faced her daughter again. We're leaving. Without another argument, Martha walked toward the front door. Oliver followed silently. Caleb and Lily hugged me before leaving, unaware of everything that had happened around them. Vanessa remained standing alone in the middle of the living room. For the first time since this all began, she looked uncertain. She picked up the folder, avoided my eyes, and walked outside without another word. I closed the front door gently behind them. The house became wonderfully quiet again. Over the next several months, life slowly returned to normal. I spent mornings tending my garden and afternoons volunteering at the local library. The monthly deposits continued growing inside Caleb's and Lily's savings accounts. Occasionally, Oliver called to ask how I was doing. Our conversations were short but honest. Vanessa never called. One chilly November evening, another knock sounded at my door. When I opened it, only Oliver stood there. He looked thinner than before, older somehow. May I come in? He asked softly. I stepped aside. As he entered, I sensed that something important had changed. Whatever battle had been raging inside him was finally coming to an end. Oliver stepped inside quietly, closing the front door behind him. He looked around the living room as though he hadn't truly seen it in years. His eyes rested on the framed family photographs, the old grandfather clock, and the bookshelf Daniel had built with his own hands. I've missed this place, he admitted. I motioned toward the kitchen. Coffee? He smiled faintly. I'd like that. A few minutes later, we sat across from each other with steaming mugs between us. For a long while, neither of us spoke. Finally, Oliver took a deep breath. Vanessa and I separated. I wasn't shocked. The sadness in his face had been telling me that story long before his words did. When did it happen? About a month ago. He stared into his cup. Everything became a fight. It wasn't just about this house anymore. It was about money, control, and always wanting more. I listened quietly. She wanted me to challenge your will. I raised my eyebrows. She even spoke to another lawyer. And what did you say? Oliver finally looked me in the eyes. I told her I would never take my mother's home away from her. A gentle smile crossed my face. I'm proud of you. He lowered his head. I should have said it much sooner. You finally said it. That's what matters. He nodded slowly. Martha moved into the retirement community you recommended. Is she happy there? Very. He smiled for the first time that evening. She says she's made more friends in a few weeks than she had in years. I'm glad. She also wanted me to thank you. There isn't any need. She insists there is. We sat quietly, letting the conversation settle. Outside, the wind rustled the maple tree Daniel and I had planted decades earlier. After another moment, Oliver spoke again. I've rented a small apartment across town. That sounds like a fresh start. It is. He hesitated before asking, would it be all right if I stayed here for a couple of nights while the apartment is being painted? I smiled warmly. Of course. Relief washed over his face. But only as my guest. He laughed softly. I wouldn't dare forget that. For the next few days, life felt surprisingly normal. Oliver helped me rake leaves from the yard. He repaired the loose gate Daniel had been meaning to fix before his illness. We cooked dinners together, talked late into the evening, and shared memories we hadn't spoken about in years. Little by little, the distance between us disappeared. One Saturday afternoon, Caleb and Lily came to visit. The children ran laughing through the backyard, piling colorful autumn leaves into enormous heaps before jumping into them again and again. Their laughter filled the house with warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Oliver watched them through the kitchen window. I almost lost all of this. I placed a hand on his shoulder. "You found your way back." He nodded. I nearly confused peace with giving in. Many people do. Now I understand. You don't keep a family together by sacrificing one person's dignity. Exactly. Several weeks later, Martha stopped by for coffee. She looked healthier than I had ever seen her. "There are gardening clubs, book groups, and even dance nights," she said with a laugh. "I've been busier than when I owned my apartment." "I'm happy for you," she smiled. "So am I." Our friendship wasn't built on years of shared memories. It was built on honesty. Sometimes that creates stronger foundations than history ever can. As winter slowly gave way to spring, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Oliver visited every other weekend with the children. We baked cookies, played board games, and planted flowers in the garden Daniel had loved so much. The savings accounts for Caleb and Lily continued to grow, waiting for the day each child would begin building a future of their own. Vanessa remained part of the children's lives, but she never returned to my house. That chapter had closed. One sunny afternoon, Lily looked curiously at the sturdy locks on my front door. "Grandma," she asked, "why do you always lock your house?" I smiled as I brushed a strand of hair away from her face. "So the people who come inside are the ones who are truly welcome." She considered my answer before giving me a hug. "I like coming here. I like having you here." As evening settled over the neighborhood, I sat alone on the backyard bench Daniel and I had built together years ago. The golden light filtered through the maple leaves, casting gentle shadows across the lawn. This house had witnessed birthdays, celebrations, tears, loss, forgiveness, and second chances. It had stood through every season of my life. People often believe strength is measured by how loudly someone argues or how forcefully they demand their way. They are mistaken. Real strength is remaining calm when others pressure you to surrender what matters most. One respectful but unwavering no protected everything Daniel and I had spent a lifetime creating. I still drink my coffee black every morning. I still sleep on the left side of the bed. Some evenings, the silence reminds me that I miss my husband. But it also reminds me that every room, every photograph, every window, and every memory remains exactly where it belongs. Home is more than walls and a roof. Home is the place where your dignity is safe, and mine always will be.